Scrutiny panel meeting. In terms of apologies, I don't think we've got any at the moment. Martin may well yet appear. As normal, if we could start off by doing introductions of the people who are on the panel. So just to introduce myself to start off with, I'm Rob Walker, Councillor for Combe Valley and Chair of this panel.
Andrew Bird, lay member of the panel.
Councillor Bill Armicker, Burton Ward.
Richard Murgatroyd, Gowker Ward.
Harpreet Ashbrow Ward.
Mark Mercer, Co-op T.
Judith Hughes, Almonbury Ward.
Right, thank you. We've got two main items on the agenda later. We're doing a rough sleeping update, and we've got Councillor Cathy Scott and Stephen Cale and Helen Gildart present for that item. And the second main item is going to be looking at the Green Spaces strategy, and we've got Rob Dalby, who's the lead officer on this, Councillor Mather, and we've also got Tim Duke, who's the chairperson of Natural Kirklees. And one welcome to Tim. It's good to have people from partner organisations coming along to talk to us in Scrutiny and answer some of our questions. Right, looking at the minutes of the previous meetings, if you remember last time we didn't cover this because of the fact that we'd had the meeting before that was the one where we were looking at the Hackett Review and the Green Paper on social housing, and there were not enough people here really to look at the minutes. So if we look at the minutes, we need to go back. The first set of minutes is from the 10th of October. Are there any matters arising from the meeting of the 10th of October that have not come up since then? Okay, is everybody happy to approve those? Okay, thank you. Right, the second set of meetings are the meetings agendas are the agenda from the meeting minutes rather from the 31st of October. Any matters arising from those? Yes, Amber.
Oh, it's on. Yeah, just on page 9, when we were talking about the tower blocks. Sorry, I wasn't at this meeting, so that's one reason that I'm asking. It says that they were having to make negotiations with one of the private tower blocks about assurances around the safety of it, and I was just wondering if there'd been any update about whether they've been able to move forward on that one.
I'm not too sure what the question was there. If you'd want to pop it in writing to me, I can get a message back to Scrutiny, but your time has actually passed to ask that question now. So if you send it in writing to me, I can do it, because we had all the folders with us and all the information there. So I wasn't too sure what you were asking on the tower blocks.
Would that be okay, Harpreet? Yeah, so we can send it through and then, yeah, we can refer to that at the next meeting. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I understand with it being a couple of meetings ago. Yeah, thank you, Harpreet. Right, anything else? Okay, are we happy to approve those meetings as being those minutes as being a correct record? Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, the last set of minutes is from the last meeting, which was on the 7th of November. So, are there any matters arising from those? I've got a couple of things. I just wonder if anybody else has got any issues. No. Right. Okay. The two things I wanted to raise. Firstly, if you remember, going back to that meeting, we said that we would like to set up a fairly formal working group looking at a number of things related to the town centre strategy. We were looking at the partnership working in developing the town centre offer and linking that to the business improvement district group. And we were also looking at potentially fixing up a visit to Dewsbury Town Centre. Now, with that, there have been a few issues around the capacity of officers working with Scrutiny to set up a working group which is actually looking at these things in detail. It is something that in the longer term I'm still keen that we do pursue, because I think one of the issues around the town centre is we've got a number of different groups all looking at different aspects of things, and since we last met, you will have probably picked up through the Examiner and social media and so on that another group has been set up by people claiming that there isn't enough representation for, quotes, ordinary people in the town in terms of what's happening. So this is obviously quite a big issue, but I do take the point that to look at this properly would take some time and some real planning. So what I intend to do before we meet in January is to go back to have a chat with Julie Stewart-Turner, who was the overall chair of Scrutiny, to have a chat with Peter McBride and think about what we actually do in terms of taking this forward. Things that have definitely been arranged are the meeting to Barnsley and to Dewsbury to look at the market developments. In Barnsley, there's obviously a big scheme. £180 million have gone in just into the market in Barnsley to have a look at what they're doing there. But also then, later on in the afternoon, the plan is to go over to Dewsbury and have a look at the things that are happening with the market there. I do think with what's happening in Dewsbury, I would still like to fix up another opportunity for us to visit Dewsbury to have a chat with the wider aspect of the town centre development in Dewsbury. Because I do think at the last meeting, because of time pressures, we didn't give Dewsbury the time that it's due, really, I think, to look at the work that's happening, especially as the work is a little further forward than the work in Huddersfield. Don't know if anybody's got any comments around that, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be quite interested actually to hear to actually develop some sort of conversation with that group that's arisen, because I think it's got to be a good thing that people are active and care about the town, and I'd be pretty curious to hear what they've got to say. We might not agree with it necessarily, but I think it would be interesting to hear what they've got to say actually, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're referring there to this new group that's been set up. Yeah, I think that's true. But then you've also got the civic society, you've got the bid group, you've got the group that's looking at the branding of both Huddersfield and Kirklees. I think all of those things, I think it would be interesting at some point to try and look at how that may be brought together more effectively as part of the town centre strategy.
As a councillor from Dewsbury, I'd welcome to know which group you are actually talking about, Rob, because I do believe there's various groups and they are trying to coordinate an approach. There is a group called Dewsbury Forward that's been going for quite a while, working with the Chamber of Commerce. Very receptive group, would welcome Scrutiny to come visit it. I can say that 100%. And they're welcoming new businesses. They do tours around Dewsbury, looking around Dewsbury, looking at buildings to see how we can work better, more effectively. So, you know, when you talk about groups, it'd be nice to know what groups that you think, because the best people to talk to are the ward members in the Dewsbury area.
Right, we weren't specifically referring to any groups there. We were actually, it was the council officers working on that. Yeah, so we would seek their guidance, and also, obviously, it would be good to work with members from Dewsbury to determine who would be the right people for us to talk to there. So we've not really gone as far as exploring the different groups which are operating in Dewsbury. So your advice on that would be gratefully received if you can fix something up in the new year. I just think it is important that we give Dewsbury the kind of attention that we gave to Huddersfield in the meeting. I just think we need to show its importance.
Yeah, I just think with you using the word group, it sounded like a new group was set up. So it's just for the general public out there, so that they are aware that it's not another new group. So.
No, certainly not. It was really about the council's strategy in those areas and the partners that they're working with. Right, I think one other thing that was mentioned in the minutes is the work that Councillors Armour and Councillor Hughes are undertaking, looking at housing allocation. And I gather that you've got a further meeting now after Christmas. Yeah, so yeah, so possibly at the next meeting you may have some things to bring back to us there. Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll move straight on now to the rough sleeping update, and I think, Kath, you were going to do an introduction before we move into Stephen giving us more detail around this. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rob. I'd just like to introduce the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol report. I'm delighted that Stephen Cale's here today and also Helen Geldart. They've worked tirelessly on this report with other officers. Can only commend them. And it's about the partnership working, about what we are doing to tackle this. There is some new updates that are in it. We've learned from lessons from before. But as I said, Stephen Cale's going to present the report to you. We're open to any questions and any feedback. We do, treat this very seriously, and we do think that Scrutiny has a good involvement in it. We do see that as a way forward. So I'll introduce Stephen Cale now. He'll present the report, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Councillor. The update is really a follow-on to previous reports that we brought to Scrutiny. This specific report outlines three aspects. As Councillor Scott said, the improvements to our Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, or SWEP is the acronym we use for that. And again, that follows the lessons learned from the SWEP in operation last winter. Also, it's an outcome from our latest Rough Sleeper meeting with homelessness partners, and also the report is just provides an update on current Rough Sleeper funding bids. I think it's worth, for context, just outlining SWEP and what it is. It's actually activated when temperatures are forecast to fall to 0 degrees or below for 3 consecutive nights, or where there is particularly adverse weather. I think it's worth saying for clarity that this is an additional safety net for those in danger of sleeping rough. We sometimes hear comments that if you can help people when it's cold, why can't you help them the rest of the year? Our Housing Solutions Service, homelessness partners and street outreach groups operate throughout the year and assist many at risk of sleeping rough, but SWEP provides quicker access to an emergency bed while we continue to work with individuals. Last winter was particularly long, and SWEP provision was activated on 45 nights, and 43 people took up an offer of an emergency bed on 1 or more nights. Some members of the public experienced some delays and frustration regarding SWEP referrals from our out-of-hours service. So this year, to minimise confusion, our emergency bed and our out-of-office phone service will be coordinated by the same partner, which is Home Group at Clare House. We've also increased the circulation list from when SWEP is activated and ceases, and we're also ensuring that we have better communications to people out there to know when it's activated and to help people on the streets as to what to do. Also, to ensure that we provide better follow-up advice and assistance, in addition to an emergency bed, this year we'll be providing access to a breakfast for the people that we accommodate, and also a dedicated housing solutions officer will be located at the Huddersfield Mission. That's to help our monitoring, to improve our monitoring and to better consolidate the help and support that's offered at the time. With regard to the rough sleeping updates, in previous years, Housing Solutions Service would meet our homelessness partners on an annual basis to discuss rough sleeper numbers. Within Kirklees, we have a wide variety of partners from within the council, across public bodies, homelessness organisations, charities, faith groups and street outreach groups, who have a wealth of information and intelligence around these people living on the streets and the periphery of sleeping rough. During the past year, we've contributed to the Street Outreach Good Practice Guide and networking opportunity. This is aimed at helping volunteers and groups to deliver a safe and consistent service to those living on the street. This guide was originally scheduled for a soft launch in September. Unfortunately, it was delayed with some graphics around the actual guide, but we will let members know when a new date has been rescheduled. We've also increased the multi-agency rough sleeping meetings from annual to quarterly. This is to share information amongst colleagues and partners to better understand those at risk, those sleeping out, and also those engaging with support and accommodation. Our latest snapshot figure for the Kirklees area, which is we picked one night in which to look at who would be sleeping out, and we identified 13 people who were sleeping rough. This is an increase from 8 from this time last year. In part, that increase is due to the excellent quality of the intelligence shared by partners and outreach workers. We're better aware of the situation and those people falling in and out of homelessness. But having said that, visibility of people on the streets seems to be on the increase across the country. And as we've reported previously, health issues, substance misuse and poor mental health can prevent people from acquiring and sustaining appropriate accommodation. That leads the report nicely to some of the funding opportunities that we are bidding for. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, the MHCLG, are making funding available for local authorities under their rough sleeping strategy. The Rough Sleeping Cold Weather Fund is intended to help people, or is helping to provide swift and bespoke interventions to rough sleepers. For Kirklees Council, this is likely to be up to a maximum of £10,000, and we intend to fund our SWEP improvements through this route. We've also submitted a rapid rehousing pathway bid to fund dedicated workers within Housing Solutions Service to work specifically with those people where there is a cycle of rough sleeping. As I mentioned, many have complex needs which leads to social isolation and a reluctance to engage. So the navigator would build trust and rapport, which is vital when encouraging people to engage with appropriate support. Additionally, the navigator will work to identify and support women who are often the hidden homeless and more vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. MHCLG are expected to confirm successful bids imminently. Also just announced this week, there's a further £11 million fund for 2019-2020 from the MHCLG's Rough Sleeper Initiative, and local authorities are asked to submit a completed bid by the 14th of January. So that's something that Housing Solutions Service are working on currently. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Stephen, for your written report and that really good summary of the key points. I think one thing that always strikes me when talking to yourself and colleagues is just the quality of the service that we provide, and I think it's something that is often not well enough appreciated by the citizens of Kirklees. I think we do try and do a really good job to deal with this serious and growing problem. Right, any questions?
I'm just wondering if we have any data on how many of rough sleepers are ex-service men or women. Do we have any data on that?
We do collate that information. Out of the ones that we discussed, and rather, as well as the 13 that were identified, we discussed around 35 people who were on the periphery of it. I think there was a couple that had some involvement with armed services, but not anyone that's just recently left the service. It is information that we do collate.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm just wondering if, because government every now and then announces some sort of initiative about ex-services, I'm just wondering if there's any funding streams we could tap into for that. Have you explored that?
Councillor Armour, I'm unsure about the funding, but regarding the armed services, people in the armed services, we have signed a covenant and they are priority on our housing, so that I can be rest assured that they are engaged with anybody that does present themselves, so there is an armed services covenant that they have signed. So, but regarding funding, I'm sure that officers would be on that straight away. Good question. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Cathy. Richard and then Judith.
Yeah, I'd really like to echo Rob's point. I actually think you're doing a really good job. I think you're really comprehensive. I should declare an interest. I worked with homeless young people in Bradford quite a few years ago now, so and I know just how difficult this work is. And there are really no easy solutions, and I have to say you've got it all. You've got the partnerships, you know, you've got all the very rapid response, and you've got a wide variety of responses available. So great. But what I did want to ask you about was, there's always a but, isn't there? I did want to ask you about prevention, really, because I mean, as we know, street homelessness is just the tip of an iceberg. Actually, homelessness is a continuum in reality, and, you know, that covers all ages and many different situations indeed. And, yeah, so, but I suppose what I wanted to ask you really was about what preventative measures the council is operating in terms of, you know, because it does, and really just I wanted to ask you as well about, are you kind of experiencing new at-risk groups? Because, you know, Councillor Armour mentioned ex-servicemen are a well-known at-risk group, but it does appear to me that there could be new at-risk groups like asylum seekers or people actually having problems with universal credit and things like that. So just wanted to ask if that's emerging as an issue, and if so, what preventative measures can we as a council actually do to kind of, because we all know once you become homeless, the spiral begins then, and it's you know, it's difficult to stop it sometimes. So yeah, that's it.
Yes, I suppose that brings out some wider issues, really, the kind of things that we did look at last year, but obviously it's still a big issue this year. Helen, do you want to come in on that?
Okay, thank you, yeah. In April this year, the new Homelessness Reduction Act came into force, which gave local authorities some new duties around the prevention and the relief of homelessness for a much wider group of people than the main homelessness duty has for certain priority groups of homeless individuals. Doesn't mean that the council has to provide accommodation for that wider group, but that we do need to work with individuals through the development of a personal housing plan, so that together the local authority and the individual concerned can look at the circumstances of their situation and their potential homelessness, and we do everything that we can at that point to work with them for at least a period of 56 days to ensure that we can support them into appropriate accommodation. So we will work, it depends on the individual circumstance, but what we have seen over the last few months is certainly an increase in the number of people approaching us who've got difficulties with the loss of their private rented sector tenancy as a result of difficulties paying their rents, which could be associated with welfare reform changes, etc., and difficulties there. That is now, I think, the main reason for the cause of homelessness in Kirklees, where we do accept a duty. So we do work with those individuals and with landlords and any welfare and exchequer services, etc., to try and ensure that people have got access to the benefits that they're entitled to, that they get debt advice, information, and that we support them to try and continue to remain in the property that they're actually living in, where it's safe to do so. We also know that increasingly there are a number of younger people that are finding it difficult to access accommodation, especially into private rented sector. As you're probably aware, rents are increasing. For many people, they're finding it difficult to actually access private rented. So we do have, working with partners and others, ability to, again, liaise with landlords to try and get them to rent properties at the local housing allowance rates, and we'll negotiate and help try and find support with bonds, etc., across the partnership to enable access into that sector. Of course, we're constantly working with our social housing stock and with Kirklees Neighbourhood Housing and Pinnacle in terms of access into the council's housing. And again, we work with them very closely to ensure that we prevent people from becoming homeless from our own stock, but also gaining access to that stock as well. Is there anything else? Other prevention activities? I think that's but we're doing what we can. And in fact, the number of prevention and relief activities have significantly increased over the last 8 months or so since the new Act came into force, and we'll be reporting that through to government as we're required to do, but obviously that will be published through our corporate internal reporting process as well.
Right, thanks Helen for that very comprehensive answer. I think it is rather worrying that there are more younger people appearing that there's homelessness problems. Yes, Judith.
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 24 about women. Do we have a breakdown of the gender of the rough sleepers out there? And also, when I used to be in Greenhead, I used to be very involved with the Sweet Project and the Swans Project. And I just wonder, is that still going? If not, what have we put in place? How are we actually protecting these women? And can you tell me if the number of women out on the streets has actually gone up?
I do know that from the latest estimate that we did in November, that of the 13 individuals that were verified as sleeping out on that particular night, 12 of them were male and 1 was female. 12 of those, just for context again, were over 25 years and 1 was under 25 years of age, and they were all UK nationals. In terms of the numbers from previous years, I mean, there was 1 female, so I'm not quite sure whether we had any last year or not. I'd have to go back and check that figure for you. Steve knows, sorry.
Yeah, from those that we actually verified as rough sleeping, as Helen said, we had 1 female this time. We had 1 female last time out of the 8. With the partners all discuss people, because obviously there's a group of people who fall in and out of homelessness. What we are seeing in the recent discussions this year is that the number of women that we are discussing has increased, so they're becoming more visible to those partners. But I think one of the key bits that we identified in the funding bid for the Navigator would be to actually focus on that area, because we are aware that women tend to be in that hidden homelessness and therefore may not actually end up on the street, but actually may end up in something that's more a worse situation, really. So yeah, we are aware, and it is, the numbers that we're seeing are more than in previous years.
Can you just confirm whether the Sweet Project and the Swans Project is still going, and if anything replaced that?
Sorry, Councillor Hughes, I don't know whether that is the case. It wasn't a service run by our particular service, but we'll check that out for you and come back to you.
Just got a couple of simple questions, I hope. Is there any logical reason for picking 0 as the trigger point? I would have thought you could get hypothermia at a much higher temperature than 0. Why not 5 degrees or 10 degrees or some such number?
What we tend to do is we adopt the government's recommendation of 0. We do have flexibility within that for when it's about the prolonged period rather than it just being 1 or 2 nights. You're right, I wouldn't like to sleep out in temperatures higher than that. But actually what we're finding is at those lower temperatures, that's when people who are sleeping out probably are more likely to ask for help. We're not rigid on the temperature bits. If it was snow, for instance, which ironically tends to be when it's warmer than 0, if there's snow on the ground or if there's flooding or other extreme weathers, we are flexible enough to be able to activate SWEP at different times.
Okay, and can you tell me what exactly is meant by an emergency bed? I mean, is it bed and breakfast? Is it a hostel? Is it a garden shed?
No, it's a camp bed within a communal room at the single homelessness hostel at Clare House. We also provide the breakfast. This year we're providing a breakfast afterwards as well.
Well, I read some years ago that there are people out there who just can't cope with communal accommodation. They're scared of the bugs or the other people and so forth. If it's not private, they're not going to accept it. Do you, in fact, still have that problem?
The SWEP, as I say, is an additional safety net. We are working all the time with people, and you're right, the people come to housing solutions with a range of complex issues, of which sharing accommodation is one of them. So we always try and look for a solution that's appropriate to the individuals. What the SWEP provision is, because we don't always have a duty to provide accommodation to single people, but what that provision is that it is that bed that we can provide while we're still working with the individual.
I think Stephen's actually said it, but I just one of the suggestions, it'd be nice if Scrutiny would go and visit Clare House, if they would allow that, because I think it'd be lovely that you actually see the facilities and what they actually do when they're working with homeless people. So I think if that's something that you could take up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. I know Judith and myself, we went as part of... Oh, did you not? Yeah. Yeah. I thought you went as
This is the question I was going to ask is about whether or not we could go.
Right.
And again, from a female point of view, because Cathy and I did discuss Clare House, because I was saying from a female point of view, I might feel a bit, if it's going to be all male in there, and I'm the one female homeless person going into there, how would I feel?
Yeah, I found it extremely interesting. There were quite a large group of councillors went as part of the Tackling Poverty group, and it was really interesting. So we looked at the general provision, but also then what would happen when these protocols came into place, how they could create extra spaces for people. So yes, it would be a good thing to try and fix up. So I think that's something that we could probably do fairly easily. It's just going to be a matter of finding a date where people are available. Right. Could I bring Harpreet in next? She's been waiting patiently. Harpreet, would you?
Sorry, I keep doing that. Thank you for all your presentations this morning. There's some really good initiatives here, and I'm really excited that you've put in the bid for the rapid rehousing pathway. You know, obviously, a lot of charities like Crisis are saying this is the route that we should be taking, so that's absolutely excellent. So, absolutely well done on that. And I think, as a member of the public, you see people rough sleeping, but you might not necessarily recognise the work that's going on behind the scenes by the council. So just want to make sure that we put across that there is a lot of work going on. I was just wondering, as a member of the public, how can we make them more aware of the work that we're doing? And I'm sure we are. So just to, perhaps if you could say what methods you use in that. And with the out of hours number, how do we promote that with members of the public as well? So if they do need, if they feel concerned about someone, how we refer that through. And then just on the street outreach work that we do, I'm just wondering how that works in terms of it being proactive. Do we go out and speak to people on the street? How regularly does that occur? So just wanting to get a little bit more detail on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if you go to page 22, it does say in the report about the intensive social media that we're using, and you're actually right, Councillor Harpreet. What we are doing is updating all the councillors with all the organisations involved, all the contact telephone numbers. We're going to be using the media to get the message out there. That'll be social media, any kind of vehicle that we can use. But it's also about working with the groups that are out there, existing voluntary groups. And if you don't mind, I'll just elaborate on that, because one of the key things that Councillor Murgatroyd said about working in partnership, and I'd like to just mention like Home Group, Huddersfield Mission, Chart, Clare House, Fusion, Simon on the Street, Safe for Kirklees, the police, and other people's goodwill is what makes this work and what makes Kirklees successful. So, I'd like to commend them for the work they do. But all these organisations, it's a joined-up approach. The message is getting out there. And I know you say sometimes it's people's perception that, but there's intensive work and nobody's turned away.
Could I just say something before the answer to the second question? I think that's really important. It's something that we recognised when we looked at this in the last municipal year. Do you think it's probable that the report from the groups that are working together on this, that's likely to come out over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, the work that we did with the street outreach, obviously Kirklees Council were just a partner to it. It's actually groups from the Homelessness Forum, led primarily by Huddersfield Mission and Fusion Housing. Yes, as I say, it was supposedly, the guidance was supposed to be soft launched in September, but there were some issues with the graphics. But actually, and the reason why it was a soft launch is that wasn't to be the be-all and end-all. That was really just to be the framework so that volunteer groups can actually come together and have some sharing of ideas, minimising some of the duplication that goes on, and actually have some sort of code of practice or guidance by which to operate, because what we do find is that there's a whole range of reasons why people go into street outreach, all for good intentions, but some of them probably haven't quite got the governance in place, and it's as much about protecting the people who go out there helping, as well as protecting the vulnerable people who are out there on the streets as well. So I did try and chase up with the people who were getting the guidance together, but I've not had a recent update, but it should be pretty imminent. So I will let people know when the guidance comes out, which will be then available both in document format and on a website, and also the opportunities for groups to meet and share ideas as well.
Sorry for intervening there. Do you need a reminder of the second question? What was your second question, Harpreet?
It's just about if you could just explain the process that you go through in terms of speaking to rough sleepers and how proactive do we go out on a daily basis and go out and identify people, that sort of thing. And sorry, if I could just ask, is there enough provision locally as well? So if a person does want a bed, I know it's not always that easy actually about just offering, you know, if someone was offered a bed and they wanted it, is there enough provision locally to meet those needs?
During SWEP, we always provide a bed for those that need it, be it at Clare House or alternatively. Housing Solutions Service don't provide an outreach service at the moment, a street outreach service. We rely on our partners to do that. And part of the whole networking of outreach ones is to better understand and coordinate better who is out there, so that you do avoid the two organisations going out on the same night and one not on the other night. There does seem to be quite a number of both volunteer groups, faith groups, as well as other organisations who go out there and have a presence on the street.
I think it's fair to say that the staff in Housing Solutions Service, although it's not a service that we do deliver, because they do care. When they get information back, they do go out during the day and they do engage with individuals that are out on the street and try and encourage them to work with us and accept support that's available. So we do that, but this is the reason why we've put the bid in, is to get that additional resource so that we can be much more proactive in that activity.
I just want to add to that. It was a really good question because it is about people's mental health and state and whether they want to engage with us. And I can reassure you, we never give up, even if it's going daily to see that person to do that welfare check. They don't give up. So that's why I'm wanting to commend officers and the time that all these groups spend going out to feed back and gather that information, because sometimes people aren't ready and it's very overwhelming when you're trying to sit them down and fill in forms. They're already in crisis, and that's like the last thing they want. So I can reassure you that there is that support.
Yeah, I think that's something that people often don't pick up. With the conversation I had with Stephen last week, he was detailing to me some particular cases where people had gone back time after time to persuade people to accept some form of help, and eventually usually something is sorted out, but it can be quite a difficult process. You can't force people to do things.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, it's more of a comment, and it's about terminology. And it's noticeable today that there is a tendency to conflate categories, and that's much more so in the public perception. Because in fact, there are at least three categories. One's homelessness, people without a settled accommodation, but somewhere to live in the meantime. There's rooflessness, but that might be someone with access to a casual shelter, perhaps on an evening, and then there's rough sleeping. And we're tending to conflate the three, and it's a sort of natural progression that people do conflate them, but we do need to, I think, perhaps educate the public to some extent as to which one we're talking about, but certainly to be clear ourselves which category we're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, and we are particularly focusing today on the rough sleeping. I guess Richard's question earlier, it was about how do people end up in those situations, but you're correct, that's what we really should be concentrating on in this discussion. Yeah, Judith.
Yes, just a quick question. The Rough Sleeping Cold Weather Fund, is it something we have to bid into, or is it something that's coming to us? And how do they work out how much funding we get, and when are we actually going to get it?
Yeah, it's based on what they allocate or what is available for us to use is based on last year's rough sleeper figures. So for Kirklees Council, it's up to £10,000. Because it's designed for this winter and to make an immediate impact, the way that they have outlined it is that we say what we're going to use it on, so it's the sweat provision and one or two other things. And then what we do is any expenditure during the winter, we then reclaim that back. So it's not a bid for it and you get the pot of money. It's actually on an ongoing basis.
So basically, it's payment by results.
It's payment by expenditure.
Firstly, thank you. I was very warmed by hearing about all the partnership working and everything else that you're doing. Homelessness and rough sleeping is a symptom of other safety nets failing. I just wondered whether you, and I didn't hear you mention the health service, I may have missed it. I wondered whether there were concerns about addiction services or drug treatment services or mental health services capacity to help these people, because that's what they need. I know they need to want to have the help, and that's all part of the conversation that we're having, but let's get a sense of whether you're picking up the failure of other services to provide timely and effective support.
I think it's fair to say that across the sectors that you've just talked about, resourcing has been an issue for a long time now, and I think capacity in all of those sectors is not as we would all wish that it was. So we do on occasion struggle to try and get the support that some individuals might need. But there are things out there, and there's housing-related support services that address some of the issues that you've talked about, mental health, etc., which tend to be a lower level than the main service provision thresholds are. So in answer, no, there probably isn't the capacity there, but everybody that is working in that area is doing the best that they possibly can to support those individuals to address and deal with their problems and issues. And we're working with them wherever we can. Through the Homelessness Forum, there are partners on there that provide services to people with low-level mental health and drug and alcohol addiction services as well.
It's just a comment. I'd like to come back to what Councillor Armour actually did say, and where he's mentioned homelessness, rooflessness and rough sleepers. Well, there is a common thread between them all. They're all in need and they're all in crisis. So it's bear that in mind whilst you will try and separate it out. All these individuals need intensive support, and there is a common thread between them all. Thank you.
Thanks very much again for coming in. So thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Stephen, in particular for your report and your answering of our questions. And Helen, you're very much a regular at these meetings. Thanks again for the detail that you always provide us with your answers. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you as well. Yeah. Anybody else would like to get a drink? We'll have a brief two minutes break. Thank you. Are you happy to speak from there, or do you want to move forward? Are you okay?
Move back in fact then. Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, which is looking at the
draft green space delivery strategy. So the way we're going to do this, Rob is going to lead off with an outline of the strategy. Would you like to speak? Would you like to speak first?
Yes.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Walker, for giving my service the opportunity to come here. There's been quite a lot of work done over the past couple of years. Okay. I've been told to move the mic. So, thank you very much for inviting my service to speak on the changes in the pipeline in relation to green space strategy. A lot of work has been done over the past couple of years in relation to the changes. We are here this morning for guidance and to elaborate and inform the work that's been happening. So despite the fact that the strategy is an overall document, there are detailed plans that sit underneath that strategy, and hopefully by sharing it with colleagues this morning it will inform how we move forward. Thank you. Rob?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Hopefully you can all... I've got the microphone in the right place. Right. The purpose of this morning, really, as far as the service is concerned, is to get a bit of a steer that we're on the right direction for the strategy. The strategy document is intended to sit over the top of a significant number of appendices, and those appendices are the detailed operational plans on how we will deliver this. But the strategy itself is intended to show the links with the corporate plan, and I will quickly go through those in a minute, and also show that one of the principal components of Green Space is as an enabling organisation or service for other partners. So whilst we manage the spaces, lots of things play out inside our spaces. So we're working with public health, we're working with communities and so on internally to the council. We're working with Natural Kirklees as a external partner. And it really is intended that you are comfortable with that, this document showing that direction of travel. So the principal drivers for this, it sits within the local plan, and unless you wish me to, I don't intend reading through this. I'm sure you've all read it. So it sits in the local plan about green space and how green space will be part of one of the principal drivers for the local plan. We also sit with a number of priorities, so for healthy people, for quality places. The obvious one is for safe, accessible and connected green spaces, and then delivering differently. A lot of the appendices sit underneath this, and when we discussed this in a pre-meet, the intention wasn't really to go through those. They are quite long, they're quite involved, and they cover quite a span, and I think that we'll probably go beyond the scope of the time available to go through those. But I'm happy to kind of outline them. So, and then delivering differently. So we are principally looking at how can we change our grounds maintenance delivery to a knowledge-based system. So previously we had gold, silver and bronze, or we presently have gold, silver and bronze. We're moving to a more locally focused knowledge-based delivery system so that we deliver the right outcomes in any particular given space. And those outcomes are seen through a number of lenses. So both about the civic amenity, if you wish, of that area, but around biodiversity, around customer need and the need of that particular area, and making sure that councillors are also at the heart of all our decision-making as representatives of the community. We're also looking to how we can have a more flexible system that's based around trust. So one of the principal drivers, again, inside the council with the people strategy is looking at how can we empower our staff. So it's looking to push some of the decision-making down so that the people who actually deliver the work are aware, are best placed to make some of those decisions inside an informing framework. So there's quite a lot of work going on around that at the moment. we're looking to meet things like the White Rose Forest requirement. So you're probably aware that over the next 25 years there's an increase in canopy cover. We obviously manage a lot of spaces, so it's how can we tie into that, and there's green streams and other initiatives that sit around that. So it's understanding about where should we deliver the service from. So there's a depot strategy looking at where we will actually deliver the service from. There's a machinery strategy, so if we change our delivery profiles, what machinery should we be doing? And one of the most important ones is about delivering the best support we possibly can to our workforce. So understanding about succession planning, looking at making sure that people are properly trained and equipped, that all those well-being factors as well that sit around people, that we support people through a change process, which inevitably will be, difficult for some people, as change always is, and wrapping all of that around the workforce so that they are the most important thing in terms of delivering what the outcomes will be for the service. And then ultimately, it is making sure that we place local concerns and that sort of locus dei, that local feeling at the very heart of what we do. So it isn't one size fits all. It isn't about rubber stamping a creation of a landscape that's fit for purpose over here, therefore it must be fit for purpose over there. It's about making sure we have those detailed local discussions and that we empower that kind of local area to deliver the right landscapes, the right solutions for people in that area. So that's kind of the heart of the strategy. And then, sitting underneath all of that are the appendices that detail how we were actually intending to deliver that. So.
Thanks very much, Rob. And I think before we go into questions, I think it would be really useful to hear from Tim Duke. It's really good to welcome Tim Duke as chairman of Natural Kirklees to come into the meeting, to give us an idea of the work that's been undertaken by one of the partner organisations. And I think partner organisations are becoming increasingly important in terms of our delivery of services and making sure that they do meet the needs of people. So could you just give us a quick outline of your organisation and the work that you are doing?
Certainly. Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to come and talk to you all. I'd like to think that you all know what Natural Kirklees is and what it does, but I would be quite foolish in thinking that. Natural Kirklees, in a nutshell, we are an umbrella organisation for the Friends of groups and green space management groups within Kirklees. So if there is a park local to you, it will probably have a Friends of that park group in it. We are the go-to organisation for these people if they have any problems in their daily routines. We can help groups in their formation. One of the things we are looking at is starting more smaller groups for smaller green spaces. We can help them with their communications to Rob and his team. We can help them in the formation of their group. We can get them constituted. We can put them on the right track. But basically, if a parks group, a Friends group or a green space management group has a problem within Kirklees, they come to us, and we work very closely with Rob and his teams. We have got to know the people to go to, and we can cut down a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and get to the core of the problem, put them in touch with the right people, and get the problem solved. Our membership is made up of these Friends groups and green space management groups. We've got approximately 108 member groups in our organisation at the moment, and as you can appreciate, within those groups is a wealth of knowledge and experience. So if we don't know the answer, one of our member groups will. The Natural Kirklees as an organisation has been in formation for the last 25 years. You will probably have heard of it before as the Kirklees Wildlife and Landscape Partnership, which once heard is never forgotten, obviously. 2 or 3 years ago, we decided that it was time to bring the group, kicking and screaming into the 21st century. We've now got a website, naturalkirklees.org. That's very unforgettable. We have social media, Twitter and Facebook. And the network is the website is the go-to place. On that website is a wealth of information for the groups, for the general public. We have an interactive map on there which we're currently looking at updating with details of every green space, what it has, what it does, what there is there. We are training groups to do phase 1 walkover surveys, which is a basic tour around their green space, mapping what they have. That will go on our website, so visitors to the area can look at this, and if they're interested in a certain item, they can click on it and it will bring up all the green spaces in Kirklees that have that particular facet with it. I think the main reason I've been brought here today is to say that we do work very closely with Rob and his team. And he hasn't paid me to say this, but how they produce what they produce with the amount of budgetary cuts they're experiencing is quite phenomenal. The budgets have been cut year on year. The amount of work they're asked to do has increased year on year. I would like to think that we are helping them in that, and will continue to do so in a greater capacity. And that's me in a nutshell, Natural Kirklees in a nutshell. Look at the website, see what we're all about. As you can tell, I'm not shy of talking. I will come to any of you individually and discuss further or meet any groups that you're involved with. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim. That was really useful, and it's great to see a partnership that's working and really enhancing the services, the things happening within Kirklees. May, do you want a quick word before we go into questions?
Yes. I'm in awe of our volunteers, Natural Kirklees, friends of groups. As you can imagine, Kirklees is very fortunate to have very large open green spaces, and I always say how proud I am to live in this district, which is both urban and rural at the same time. I want to be able to say a big thank you to all of you, our staff, Rob in particular for leading them so well, and I'm proud to lead the service. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for all that work. Just a couple of things. I mean, the strategy is predicated on the local plan actually going through, because as we know at the moment there is pressure on green spaces. There is in my ward at the moment. So we just need to, it's imperative that local plan goes through to protect those spaces. One thing that I always think about is we've got all the volunteers, which is great. Sometimes in deprived areas, some of the communities feel a pressure that they should be doing something in their area, but a lot of them have got very chaotic lives and they don't have time to volunteer, and they feel sometimes they're getting stigmatised because they're not going out and they're not doing things, but they don't have that time. How do we deal with that? And you have to be very careful of not bringing in a load of volunteers that are not from that community.
Judith, thank you for that. And you know, my own ward, Dalton, is one of those areas. It's very, very difficult to engage certain communities, not saying that they're not interested in having open, green play spaces. What we have done on a personal level is, thanks to some of the local volunteers who come in, and one or two of we've got our own allotments, so people are encouraged to go and visit those, take part, not by owning an allotment, but actually joining in to see the benefits of health and well-being attached to it. One of our centres, which we're trying to make a more or less a hub of our communities, actually has an allotment at the side, which is run by another group called Growing Works, but they come into the centres and our own people, our own volunteers, our residents go out and help with that allotment and are able to take home what's grown. So that's one way. I'm not saying it's a template, but we are definitely recognising the benefits to health and well-being, and just to be able to see green space outside your window or as you're walking through urban areas, it's key to health, and we're definitely focusing in on those, and I want to bring Rob into it.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. In terms of the service standards, then, like I mentioned before, it's intended to be knowledge-driven. So there's a recognition that some areas will be able to do more for themselves and will possibly take on, village greens or whatever else it might be. And some areas will be able to do less for themselves. So the intention is that we would ensure that there is an equality of landscape, which doesn't mean you do the same for everybody, but it means you give everybody that same equal high quality as we can manage landscape. I think if people wish to come forward, obviously we will support them. We've got volunteer coordinators and we have networks with Natural Kirklees. There are other bits of the council as well that support people who may wish to come forward. For my service area, I'm not convinced that actually our role is to be that outreach organization. Yes, we're omnipresent and we do everything. But if people have chaotic lives, and I appreciate that there are some areas where there is a predominance of people who aren't necessarily able to spare the time to volunteer or to go out and do that kind of thing, then we will ensure that their landscapes are as good as they possibly can be. And if at some point that they feel they wish to come forward, then we'll obviously always be receptive to them.
Critical area in terms of how we get people to engage with the countryside. I think it's a massive link up with the health agenda as well. Yeah, right. In terms of the people coming, I think Bill, you were next, then Richard, then Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dolby and I have over the years had a few discussions about play areas and policies, etc. Some of which have been quite intense. But I would say that I do take heart from the declaration that Kirklees will work closer with communities. I think it is important that as a council we do things with communities, not to communities. I think that is very important, and I'm really happy to see that recognised. I do have a couple of specific points. In delivery, in priority 4, deliver differently, there's a mention of a focus on destination play areas rather than small play areas. Could I just have some clarification on that, because I'm not sure exactly what it means.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. The concept of a destination play area is generally regarded as a principal park or something along those lines. So that is, it's not just the play area that's a destination, but the entire space is a destination. The playable spaces strategy, which is intended to go before Cabinet, I think, is it on the 19th of February, sometime during February? It makes it really clear that the process is is about engagement, it's about understanding people's needs. One of the strands that sits inside the playable spaces strategy is for playmakers. So we also recognise that some communities may not always have the greatest understanding of what is accessible to them. So it's about making sure that we make people aware what is accessible, what is available, and what opportunities there are. So a destination is somewhere you go to, but we are very keen that we create playable routes as well, particularly from disadvantaged areas, so that just because that's where you're heading for, it doesn't mean your journey to there isn't in fact really rich and really involving. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the terminology. It is just purely that, it is mainly referred to principal parks. That the destination is where you're heading for, but the journey is equally important.
Yes, thank you for that. So effectively, we're talking about Greenhead Park, not the local play area inside this state. Thank you. Another point, and It's partly based on observation. It appears to me to be the case that green spaces and corporate landlord don't always play nicely together, and we do sometimes get at cross purposes apparently. And leading on from that, I'm a little bit concerned about planning, where if we've got a larger development, there'll be a play area provided as part of Section 106, for example, but it's usually only maintained for about 5 years, and then it just seems to fall into disuse. And I'm just wondering if we can have a bit more continuity on this. Would it be better if planning were to look at putting Section 106 money into a nearby established play area and developing that rather than putting a small one on each corner, so to speak? Thank you.
I think it's a good point. It's one that's recognised. It's one that we would be working towards. We do recognise that we often have in development small little strips or grass verges which are left for the council after about 5 years to maintain, and we will be making sure that in the local plan and any new developments that we give guidance in relation to what the 106 money is spent, and we will be making sure that we don't have grass verges left, that we have areas that are resilient, areas that put in to their communities and encourage friends of groups. So by the time the lease or the landholder of that green space loses interest, that we have a thriving, resilient group to take over. I am not going to say that the council will always step in, because, as was recognised, there are finite resources, and my staff is having to work, stretch and go above and beyond maintaining useful green spaces. But we are going to work with our communities and make sure that moving into the future we have a land, open space, as Rob says, which is useful as to see, to use and to maintain. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue. I think it is important that when planning is happening, that work is undertaken with councillors in wards and through them with the wider local community at the planning stage. And I also think it's really important when, as part of a 106 agreement or just part of the plan, the play space is developed, linked to a site, that what is promised is actually followed through and it does happen. Because certainly I know in my own ward there are some instances where that is something that we need to be very careful with.
I just wanted to make a point, but that involving the residents or would-be residents is very important, but providing a service that meets, a service that's flexible to the needs as you move into the future. So you may have young couples moving in, they need young play areas or areas that are safe for young people. Those young people grow. If they're a settled community, we need to then think how, moving forward, what do we do with that space to make that space still useful, are the kinds of things we're talking about in relation to making a strategy fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
First of all, I'd just like to welcome the format of this report because, no pun intended, but I think sometimes we kind of hear reports and you can get a little bit overwhelmed by the jargon and the verbiage, but in this case, you got to the point and that's great. But what there was something missing that I felt really could be addressed, and that's the issue of climate change and species extinction. Now, as we know, the UN has basically given us a 12-year notice to actually change our practices. And so I should declare a bit of an interest here because I did actually run a gardening business for 3 years, and I had a break from teaching, but anyway, you don't want to know about all that. But basically, I think it's quite important in terms of management practices because, you know, you're talking about delivery, because actually there is scope for cutting carbon emissions in the way that, you know, we deliver services, but it has to be consciously done. And, I mean, I'm thinking of things about power tool usage, use of fertilisers, which are incredibly oil intensive, actually, composting practices, and especially hard landscaping, which, you know, uses materials again which are very, very carbon intensive. So those are so that would be my question. Really, would be about how we could build in right from the word go, you know, less carbon intensive management practices. And my second issue really was about tree planting. Now, I mean, me and Rob have both done a lot of tree planting over the years. We've bonded, hopefully, over trees. But anyway, basically, I know you work with the Combe Valley Tree Society pretty closely. Fantastic. What a group of people. They're amazing. And other volunteers. And I should declare an interest, as a landowner myself, you know, the council did assist in, when we my family did plant out 6 acres of woodland. So fantastic, right. But it does seem to me that in a way we've got an opportunity to actually, because the council owns loads of small bits of land, and I just wondered if we could, can you have guerrilla tree planting with the council? But maybe that could be, you know, actually target the smaller bits of land. And finally, would it be possible as well to link that with education and engagement by putting signage up, so that actually people can see, you know, what the species are, etc., etc. So those are just a few ideas. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think it's good.
Right, quite a lot there, Rob.
Right, thank you for that. This is quite an easy one for me to answer because most of the policy is around this. So, in terms of biodiversity, we are looking at, the reason we're talking about change in management practice is that we recognise that climate change clearly is a factor, and also climatic drift is a factor, so species are moving further north, so there needs to be corridor creation to allow that to happen. So we are looking at a landscape level plan and then a meta plan beyond the landscape plan, how we key in with the kind of the local area, so the larger local area, to consider species management, consider habitat management, both priority species and priority habitats, also species that may be moving north or moving south, very unlikely, but moving north as climate change happens. So we have mapped the entire district. We are working with West Yorkshire Ecology. We're working with our neighbouring authorities to consider how best we can actually deliver that. So that's quite an exciting piece of work. We're also working with the National Trust. We're working with Yorkshire Water, the other big landowners in the district, and we're working with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust as well to kind of consider those options. In order to demonstrate that we're actually effectively managing change, we're looking at, and if I disappear into jargon, I deeply apologise. So we're looking to decouple or de-link our performance indicators. So rather than looking at how many metres of grass we cut, or whatever it may be, or how many metres of hedge we manage, we are more, or the service is more interested, and the council is more interested about the impact and the outcomes of what we deliver. So one of the things that I'm particularly, I think is particularly stark around this is that we are considering measuring bat numbers as an indicator of how we are delivering. The reason being is the more bats you have, they're insectivorous. If their target species will be then reliant on certain forms of flowering plant. So we ideally want to increase the pollinator species numbers. If we increase the pollinator species numbers and the amount of food source plants they have, then inevitably the apex predator numbers will increase. That keys into citizen science. It's quite an easy thing for people to go out with a bat detector, be able to measure that. We're working with Natural Kirklees, and again, we're saying with West Yorkshire Ecology around this, so that we can then design a statistically useful way of measuring this. If things are not statistically useful, as in they're not valid, then it doesn't really demonstrate anything, but it's to look at where the key points should be and how we will do that. And all of that will help drive the landscape changes in relation to biodiversity and those kinds of management things. In terms of carbon, again, it's a really important topic. You know, there's been some very stark things that have come out of the UN, and for all the climate change agreements that cut 2 years ago and that appear to be progressing desperately well. So we are, again, investigating how we can become, as a service, considerably more carbon neutral. We generate a significant amount of green waste. At the moment, some of that is just left on site and doesn't look particularly sightly in terms of people's visual amenity. Some of it goes off to a third party to be managed and processed, but we obviously paid fees for that. That is actually an energy source. So I'm really keen that we actually make use of that. In terms of changing our management practices, it may be we move from a more frequent to a less frequent cut model, but we actually capture the material that we've taken. We actually lift the arisings, be it brash or be it grass or whatever, and do something with it. Potentially anaerobic digestion, or some form of energy generation from that. That gets fed into our depots by combined heat and power plants. That material then gets used to power electric vehicles and power electric machines. Some of the electric machinery isn't fully there yet, but certainly the technology is advancing almost monthly, never mind annually. That will then get used, so effectively you end up with a semi-closed cycle for carbon, which would be really good. If we went for something like anaerobic digestion, then you've also got a secondary and a third byproduct from it, so about 40% of the carbon comes off in terms of methane, which then gets used. There is then a solid component to that, but that can be densified and can then be used as a fuel pellet. And the final 20% is an extremely nutrient-rich liquor. That nutrient-rich liquor could then be used as a fertiliser, and again, I'd quite like us to have a closed economy, so that goes to polytunnels or whatever. We have a hydroponic culture, and then the exhaust gases from the combined heat and power plant get put into the greenhouses, which then also increase the vigour of the plant, because one of the limiting factors on plant growth is CO2 availability. If you elevate the CO2 availability, you then start to have a really exciting closed economy in relation to carbon usage, which has a significant impact on the service. We would hope that we would overgenerate, and then that can also support other services in terms of we would then provide electrification points at our depots. So yes, we are considering that. In terms of tree planting, I think that was your final point, wasn't it? As part of the landscape level sort of view of the district, that evaluation, like I mentioned, is about the White Rose Forest. It's looking at the little pockets as well as the big pockets. I think it's really important that landscapes have a continuity, but they also sit within their own regional context and their local context. But that continuity then allows species to move. So we're looking at potential school grounds. We're working with SPE, who are the facilities management provider for the PFI work for that, and we're also looking potentially with private landowners going forward once we've done the mapping to identify where these sites need to be. So I'm actually at the White Rose Forest meeting tomorrow to talk about some of our initial sites, but that will be an ongoing programme. Guerrilla tree planting. I'm obviously not going to go on record to say that's okay. However, please come and talk to us. And there is no reason why we wouldn't have that discussion around non-guerrilla tree planting. We would welcome those discussions. Natural Kirklees would welcome those discussions. And if people wish to plant trees, happy days. The only kind of slight reservation I have around it is that it's about being knowledge-driven and about landscape context. I would really not be comfortable with the concept that it's trees at all costs. There's moorland, heathland, semi-improved natural grasslands. Those would not benefit from a wholesale tree planting programme. So it needs to be in the right place, but absolutely we would welcome that discussion.
I think every planning includes greening. So we have landscaping, which ensures that the urban landscape is also greened. So when we're talking about planting trees, we need to be very careful. Moving into the future is what type of trees we plant in urban areas, the shedding in various seasons, and what they leave behind. And even are residential areas, say where the elderly live, and the types of trees will cause an inordinate amount of pain when you're not so mobile, having trees shedding leaves. Then we have other things that happen through climate change where certain trees need to come out. There are trees that the roots come up through the footpaths, pavings and roads, so we need to be very, very careful in urban areas. But all of that is being looked into, and we have somebody who's very passionate for biodiversity sitting right next to me, so I leave it in his safe hands. Thank you.
Yes, Rob, thank you. I was very heartened about you mentioning the workforce and both their health but also their development. I recognise that in the world you're describing, the skills they need are somewhat different from those of the past. So I was wondering how you're getting on with equipping them with those skills, and maybe just talk us a little bit about how you see those skills for the future.
Right. We are in the middle of a quite large engagement process with the workforce. So it's come from two directions. There were these things called innovation laboratories that the council ran, sort of at a corporate level. But I also met with my entire workforce and asked them some very simple questions. What makes your life better? How could you, this is the direction of travel for the service, and I've been really, clear and honest about that. How do you feel, or what do you feel you need to equip you for that? So we've got a number of work threads, and the charge hands and the team leaders principally are leading on those, so they've got ownership of them, to look at things like education, to understand what skills they will need going forward. And we're looking at some peer-to-peer sharing. We're looking at college-based courses. So it's around ecology. It's around sort of landscape management. In the 1980s, I'm sorry, this could become a bit tedious, there was CCT. So there was very much a drive to deliver a fairly sort of homogeneous landscape that was principally cost-driven, which meant that you then ended up with a unit cost for mowing grass. People were very driven towards mowing grass and that kind of thing. The landscape we're now looking towards is very different from that. It isn't necessarily driven by just mown grass. It's driven by the ecology of the district. It's driven by the recreational needs. So we would look to upskill the workforce to deliver those kind of things as well.
Sorry, Rob, I was thinking that, thank you for that, but I'm thinking particularly about some of the soft skills, because working with a large group of volunteers, being able to equip volunteers effectively, to engage the volunteers, to make sure volunteers feel valued. There seems to be a range of different skills which may not be associated with how fast you can mow grass. So I'm just going to sort of explore what you're doing about that as well.
Sorry. Right, we have a specific group of people, volunteer coordinators, who are the interface between the council and the volunteer groups. The reason that we have the relationship with Natural Kirklees, again, is to make sure that those interfaces are as porous and as open as possible. We also are looking, or we have site-based management plans. So for every site, or we will have for every site that volunteers work on, and eventually every site that we have, a site-based management plan which is absolutely explicit about what will happen and what the volunteers will do, and it's driven by them and in terms of their visions and aspirations, and how we can support them. Because that is then written down, it is a very easy document to share with the site staff, so they're aware of what's going on, to try and remove some of that friction, saying, oh, well, we'll do this, you'll do that. It's really, really explicit. In terms of the soft skills, I'm actually really comfortable that an awful lot of the green space guys have them, to be honest with you. The service itself has got some amazing people in it. It's got lots of amazing people in it who have really good soft skills already, whether it's because of the nature of the service and the kind of the type of people that role attracts. But I've been doing this particular role now for 3 years. I have very few concerns around that. There's very little friction. That what it is generally down to genuine misunderstandings, not because of any antipathy. And there's a recognition within the guys on the ground that actually, if we are going to continue to develop and deliver high-quality landscapes and move to a different paradigm within what we deliver, then they can't do it on their own. So yeah, if any issues do start to evidence, then yes, we will have those discussions with people, and if necessary, we can have some sort of soft skills training courses and so on. But I'm not particularly concerned around that because it's just not being evidenced.
Could I just go on to that? Obviously, as Natural Kirklees, all our members are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. I also volunteer in a friends group at our local park. And the thing with volunteers, they'll give very freely of their time while ever they're enjoying it. And as soon as you upset them or do something wrong, they won't come back, and that's it, you've lost them. We, as a group, work, again, very closely with the council. We work incredibly closely with the 4 volunteer coordinators that Rob has spoken about, and we find those very, very amenable. They know how to work with volunteers, they know how to, and this sounds awful, to handle volunteers. They're very aware of the problems that volunteering can bring, and they are very good at the skills they need to keep those volunteers coming back for more. We, as Natural Kirklees, can also strengthen that position with them as we work with volunteers all day long, sort of 24/7. So I don't think there's a worry there. The soft skill, as it's called, is very much in evidence, and I haven't heard of any instances where any of my members have said, "Oh, well, that's it there, we've done." It's always, yes, we're getting on really well now. And the transparency and the lack of red tape is also evident now between the sort of groups on the ground and the council departments that we deal with. And that is a breath of fresh air to us because you're not having to jump through hoops all the time. You've got a point of contact, a man to talk to, and get the job done.
Sorry, I keep doing that. I don't know why I do that. Thank you both for your time. Just got a couple of questions. First, excellent document here. I just wanted to ask, obviously there'll be smarter objectives that sit within that, which will have the more detailed stuff, and I think you said you're going to focus that on outcomes, those objectives. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. And I like the fact that the strategy links in inequalities. Obviously, that's going to be a key issue, and I'm a councillor in Ashbrow ward, so in particular parts of the ward, there's a lot going on with the local plan, firstly. There's a number of residents who probably feel some of their green space is going to go because of the local plan. So there is a bit of that contention, really. And obviously, I think you've spoken about the destination play spaces, but you don't see that necessarily taken away from local green space. I think how we tackle sort of urban green space is going to be a key issue, really. And I do understand with having to monitor green space and, having to update and stuff, it is a key issue. But if you could just say a little bit more about specifically how we want to work with urban green space. I'm really interested in urban farming, and it's really interesting to hear about the work that we're doing on the allotments, but how do we open that up a little bit, make it a little bit more exciting? And Tim, if I could just ask you, is there anything that you would like us to do differently, or if you had a specific wish list, which didn't, we didn't have to think about money, would there be something that you'd think, yes, this is what I'd really like to see us doing as a council?
Good question. Right, urban green space. In some parts of the district, it is an absolute premium, obviously. And accessible green space, again, is at a premium. Part of the reasons we're working with public health is that one of their stated parameters is about making it more accessible and getting people out there. So some of it is working with our partners to educate people where they can actually go. And one of the things I found most disheartening, I think, when we did the Playable Spaces initial engagement, which was last year, was that a number of groups, and I'm not going to say where they're from, but a number of groups were really clear that they felt that some of our spaces, and I'm pretty much quoting verbatim, were not for the likes of them. And from someone who is really passionate about green spaces, and I've spent most of my working life dealing with them, the fact that somebody would feel that a public amenity that is designed for everybody is a completely neutral space, it doesn't bring any agenda to it, it is just a space, would feel that it was not accessible for the likes of them, broke my heart, to be honest. So one of the threads that we'll be looking at will be how can we make sure that we engage with what are policy called hard to reach communities or difficult to reach communities or whatever, to make people see that actually these spaces are for everybody, and what do we need to do to make these spaces more welcoming. I haven't got a magic wand, I can't create new spaces, but what I can do is try and understand what the barriers are to people using those spaces and work with partner agencies, both sort of third sector and internal to the council, to try and get some of those messages across and go, well, come along, it's great, just lie on the grass. Look up at the trees. Don't do anything. You don't have to do anything. You can just come and be. And how to get people, away from areas that possibly are, this is where I start waxing slightly lyrical, and I apologise, but are slightly less sort of, soul elevating, to areas that do actually provide some solace and some surcease to kind of the daily traffic of life, if you like. So that for us, I think, is one of the really big challenges, and I think it is probably a generational issue. We recognise the fact that this challenge facing us both for play and getting people more engaged with sort of the environment and having that kind of physically engaged and imaginatively engaged play, but also just coming into green spaces, be it on public rights of way, be it on public owned land, be it on private land where people have got access rights, is really difficult. So that is something that we will focus on, and we'll work with Natural Kirklees and partners to do that. Allotments, yeah, we have a number of allotments. I'm not sure how you make allotments. I was going to use the word sexy, but I don't know how you make them, how you create that. If people wish them, there's a waiting list, they can come along to them. But we're also looking at plant it, grow it, eat it schemes. So working with volunteers, are there areas of our land that won't necessarily be used for anything else or can be repurposed, so that it almost becomes that public accessible space, so that you get an urban farm type of environment. I know there's some really successful schemes around the country, both in kind of very rural areas and in kind of more densely populated areas, where that works really well. But it needs to be driven not just by the council, there needs to be that real wish and urge for it. So it's how do we build that momentum so that people recognise that ambition as something that they wish to tie into. So yeah, absolutely. I would personally welcome things like hanging baskets that have got tomatoes coming out of them, or peppers, or whatever else it might be. That kind of concept that actually you can go and forage, you can go and gain some benefit from it would be really good.
Incredible Edible up in the Calder Valley has got a fantastic number of places that are following them, most of them outside Yorkshire, lots of them outside the UK. Is it just that it's too close and we don't feel we want to use the branding or something? But it seems very strange to me that when you go and see the sort of guerrilla planting up there, and sort of the community activity which leads to foraging and so on, and use of the space, that seems fantastic, but we don't seem to have it as a sort of is it just because it's in Calderdale? It's just a surprise.
I don't know. It's a very honest answer. So.
I've had some involvement with this. Pam Warhurst, who was the lead person within that, has actually been into Kirklees, certainly into the Combe Valley, to talk to people about doing this. And I do know one thing that's on the agenda, links one of the questions I was going to ask, was I think we're getting better about working with external partners. Certainly some of the work I've been doing with Rob, we've been working very closely with people like the National Trust. But one of the organisations that are, I think, keen to revisit the partnership with us is Pennine Prospects, which very closely linked to people like Van Warhurst. And I think going forward, there perhaps is an opportunity to look at that in terms of developing our partnership work. So I hope, I was going to ask a question about developing our partnership work, and that probably would link into that. Yeah, sorry to jump in at that point. Yeah.
Okay. We have a couple of member groups, Growing Works and Growing to School, who do a similar sort of incredible edible. It's the Todmorden one you're talking of, I think. But they deliver that to schools. So that's perhaps something that to get onto your wish list. Yeah, money is at the top of it, and I'd be duty bound to hand it over to this man. The thing I would really like is dialogue between our members and yourselves, so that they can come and talk to you, you can go and talk to them, build that relationship with yourselves and the groups that are in your area, so it doesn't come as a surprise to you when you hear of a project, or they're not thinking, oh, well, we'd best not do that because the councillors might not like it. Talk to them, get to know what they're all about, get to know what they want to do. And if we can make that happen, yeah, brilliant. It'll make everybody's life easier, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Tim.
As a co-optee, I'm on this panel as what we might call it ignorant man in the street. And I hope you forgive me, but until I read the agenda for this meeting, I'd actually never heard of you. That means that you've never done anything scandalous enough to get yourself on the front page of the Examiner. Second page, is it? Oh. I do read it up to a point, but I'm not sure how many people are aware of the work that you do. Now, it's been a revelation to me this morning to realise just how much you are actually doing for the environment, which is obviously good work, and you're obviously pretty passionate about it, which I'm quite impressed by. I have a nice bit of green space in front of my house, and I have no idea that anybody besides myself was actually interested in its welfare. I don't know whether we've got any local groups or not, but I will certainly have a look at the website and take a serious interest in the future with what you're doing, because environment is important to everybody, and I think it's perhaps a second cousin so far as the council activities are concerned. You may not have we don't have a high profile, otherwise I would have known a little bit more about you. I have a couple of questions, if not three. One is, do you actually have an interest in the grouse moors? And the other one is, what's your relationship with the planning committee or planning department? Do you get to spend time with them? Have you got any influence over them?
I couldn't possibly comment. Obviously, we have no influence over them other than we can go and talk to them. It's not something that we get to do a lot of because, as you quite rightly say, not many people have heard of us. That's why I'm here today, to get the name. That's why I go to lots of meetings like this, to get the name across. One of the things that's high on my agenda for next year is to get the name of Natural Kirklees on everybody's lips as Natural Kirklees, as what we are trying to do. We've existed for many, many years as a group that met, had a chat, went home, and nothing happened. Well, now we meet, we have a chat, and things happen. So that's why I'm here. I, like yourself, was a Scrutiny co-optee, so it's very good to be on this side of the table to see how it works the other way around. But I would like to think that there is a possibility of Natural Kirklees becoming more and more involved in the decision-making process. I don't think we will ever get to where we can make the decisions, but if we can come along to meetings like this or to planning meetings and put our members' views forward and our very little influence that we have. It would be nice to have our voice heard, and it would be nice that people knew more of who we are, what we do, and how we can help, because that's the thing. We're not here to bang on the table and say, well, this is wrong, that's wrong, we must do this, you must do that. And I hope Rob will back me up on this. It's how can we help? How can our member groups help Kirklees in what they want to achieve? Rob has an unenviable task, and we want to help him complete that task with our volunteer army, which is a terrible phrase, but the number of volunteers that we've got, the expertise and the knowledge that we've got, it's an untapped resource. Tap it. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Yeah, if I could just make a suggestion on that, Tim, I wonder if we could put forward the possibility of, before a council meeting, in the sort of half an hour, 45 minutes before it starts, coming along so that members who are coming into the council meeting could have a chat with yourself and some of your other representatives. Because I think if you can build that link with members in particular wards, it will help to link things together, really. Yeah, that would be a simple thing to do, I think. Right, I think we'd better just have one more question now, really, in terms of time. So, sorry, Mark. Right, sorry. Yeah, your last bit.
I think your first question was, do we have any influence on grouse moors? The first question was about grouse moors, wasn't it? Was that right? No, we have no grouse moors under our control. That all sits under the National Trust. The second one was planning. We have a relationship with the planners. We obviously had an input into the local plan and around that. One of my colleagues, who's a landscape architect manager, sits in planning 1 day a week. We have a good relationship with planners. I look after some other bits of stuff as well. I look after public rights of way, so we're a statutory consultee on planning applications as well. So yes. In terms of never being on the front page of the Examiner, you might not have seen my name, but I'm there relatively regularly for things generally relating to public rights of way or environmental crime enforcement. And when Gold, Silver, Bronze first started, there was a lot of press time spent around the length of grass as well. So we do appear occasionally.
The other thing.
Okay, yeah, it's. Sorry, did Harpreet?
I just wanted to know that website title again.
Yeah, I just wanted to, well, it's partly building on Harpreet's question earlier about urban green spaces, because, I mean, it's a massive discussion about modern childhood, and maybe we should do it as part of our scrutiny function. But, I mean, obviously, I think we'd all agree that in a lot of ways, children just move from one box to another, and they very rarely actually get to run out freely in a natural environment. So, given the realities, and this certainly happened in my ward, you know, the traditional play equipment wears out and we can't afford to replace it. So I suppose, I know that you've been considering more kind of landscaped, adventurous play options which are cheaper to maintain, and, well, I assumed they were, but anyway, maybe not. But, you know, so I just wondered, you know, what thoughts you've got about that, because I think, you know, Bill asked earlier, you know, about this issue of destination play areas. The best play area is one you can just go out of your house to, isn't it? A spontaneous play area, and, you know, muck around with your mates and roll about and, you know, whatever it is you want to do. So, yeah, I just wondered, you know, if you've got any kind of information on that, because it does seem to me like that's the future, actually. So.
Right. We have a paper going to Cabinet in February, so it's on flight path at the moment, so I can't say too much because there are decisions to be made around that. But the service's view on this is that we completely agree with you that play should be spontaneous, it should be imaginative, it should involve a degree of physicality, and that the concept of box play that sits in the corner of a recreation ground or a park with a fence around it, and that's the only place you play, no longer is the right philosophy. That was agreed by Cabinet, I don't know, about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, whenever, when we brought the draft play strategy through. Since then, we've done a large engagement exercise. We've also done an awful lot of desktop work, understanding where our play is located, looking at things like demographics now and projected forward, looking at super output areas, so areas of deprivation where potentially car ownership is less. I'm very keen, like I mentioned before, about playable routes. So it isn't about where you're going to, it is about the journey. So it may well be that by the time you've reached your destination, you're absolutely exhausted and all you'll do is sit there and then come home again. It's about through-age play. So play is not just for people who sit inside relatively narrow age bands. It is right the way through your life's journey. So senior play is really important. Adult play is really important. And it's how we integrate that within our landscapes. We're looking at integrating play within the urban landscape. So actually having linear play is one of the things that we're looking at, about how can we actually look at, in places like Dewsbury and Huddersfield, making use of things that are both structurally pleasing, so almost look like sculpture, but they're actually play. So embedding those inside the landscape. For me, the most important thing isn't about the thing, it's about the philosophy, which says, actually, you should be imaginative, you should be engaged, dependent upon who you are, you should be physically engaged with it as well as mentally engaged, but it's making it accessible for all. There are people with varying needs, and we should be making sure we cater for all of those as well. And then the other really important part around this is, is doing with, not to. It's the phrase that we have, but it's making sure that we have that connection with communities, that it's through councillors, but it's with community representatives. And for me, again, the most important point in that is not listening to the single, very loud voice, but trying to hear the quiet voice in the background. It's those unspoken words that you don't necessarily ever get to hear, but actually they're probably the majority of people, and it's trying to get into those. So having a considered approach that says, okay, we appreciate that this is what you would like, but how about these people? What would they like? And how can we cater for them? And how can we make sure that people who traditionally wouldn't access these spaces access them? Nothing sits separately. Everything intertwines. It's understanding that people may wish to volunteer, they may not. They may wish to come and use these spaces actively or passively. But it is available for all, and how do we make sure that people are aware of that and access it as they wish to remove as many barriers as we possibly can. So, yeah, absolutely.
Right, one last one if it's quick, yeah.
Thanks, Rob. I think that's a really good point about in terms of destination play areas. And if I just think of one of our local areas in Ashbow, Eaton, they've got a large social housing estate there. We used to have a play area which is kind of in disrepair, and one of the local groups is actually working with young people to try and you're probably aware of that. And I guess it's just making sure that the young people's voice come through, because we can talk about play areas as much as we like, but, our idea of a play area is totally different, isn't it? And the journey for some of those is going to be important, actually. So for them, it might be more important that there's something closer than having a big destination play area where that group might not use, So, I think you're there anyway in terms of that thing.
So I'm guessing you're talking about the Riddings play area. We're working with Sophie and Serena, with Conscious Youth. I think they're absolutely brilliant. But yeah, so we are working with them, but we would work with any group to have those discussions. And the more ownership that people can have of spaces, then the better it is for us. We're working with, on Beaumont Park are very keen on this, so they've commissioned their own play survey, and they're looking at how they can develop play in accordance with kind of our ethos, which is really heartening. Other groups are doing that, and it isn't something that will happen overnight. I think it's to me it's really clear this is a generational change again. I'm old. And I was brought up on a hill farm in Wales, so my concept of what play is doesn't necessarily recognise, slides and swings. It's a very different form of play. But I'm trying very hard not to let my subjective views colour this. The conversation needs to be very much driven from the user end rather than the council officers who feel we know best. We will understand the kind of the legal frameworks and the compliance aspects of this, but equally that imagination and drive probably needs to come from the community as well, and we need to be as quiet in our own mindset to listen to those voices and not superimpose our views, but make sure that what is delivered is both is sustainable and safe. But it's seen within the context of that community. Whilst we've been going through this process for playable spaces, then an awful lot of discussion has been, well, all you want to do is save money and take the swings away. And this is not what this is about at all. When the report comes out, you'll see that there is some significant capital cost that we are talking around. It's about trying to give people better opportunities and more accessible opportunities that are appropriate within their spaces. So.
Right, thanks very much, Rob, and thanks very much for coming along. And as Richard said at the beginning, providing us with a very focused paper, because this is an absolutely massive area. We've seen from today's discussion, we could spend ages just talking about play spaces, so thanks very much. And Tim, can I particularly thank you? It's really enriched the discussion today with you coming along, giving that perspective from people in the wider community, organisations in the wider community. And we need to get out there, as you say, Mark, we need to get the message out that some good things are happening here. There are some tremendous possibilities for more groups and individuals engaging with the work that you're doing. So thanks very much to both of you for coming along this morning. Thanks very much. Right, just to finish off items on the agenda, item 6, looking at the work programme. I think the things that we're looking at are pretty much as we have discussed at earlier meetings. Just one detail that Carol wanted me to remind you about, which is the fact that the visit to Barnsley Market, which has been arranged for the 30th of January, is now going to be extended to accommodate us going to Dewsbury as well. So the finish time is likely to be 3 o'clock. So I think, Carol, you were going to send things out, aren't you, there? And we will work on trying to get a broader visit to look at what's happening in Dewsbury. We will try and sort that out. And I will also try and engage with various people in this wider discussion about how we talk to the partners who were interested in the town centre. I think really the item that we've just looked at does show if you can set up an effective umbrella organisation, it does mean that dialogue between the council and the wider community is easier to manage, and I think lessons can be learned from that. The next meeting is on Thursday the 17th of January, and it's a 2 o'clock start, and on the agenda for that at the moment we've got the introductory session looking at waste, so that's going to be looking at the broad issues. From that, I think the idea is that we will perhaps focus down on the things that we wish to look at going forward. Waste minimisation has already been brought forward as a potential topic for us to look at in more detail, but we can discuss that at the next meeting. The Kirklees economic strategy is also coming back, so David Bundy's coming back with that, and that will also link, I think, to the work that's happening with the inclusive economy, because I think work is happening to bring the two things into line with each other. And then I think we have a more formal look at the rough sleeping work before that goes through to Cabinet. Yes, Richard.
I'm just conscious that the whole issue of waste minimisation is actually going to be massive moving forward. I just wondered if it might be possible to get some. Obviously, we need the officers to give us the background, but I wondered if it would be possible to get some kind of other angles on it in terms of, you know, perhaps different approaches and just that have been tried elsewhere. So we could actually put what Kirklees is doing into a wider context. And, you know, I don't know if there's, I mean, I just Googled, was the Environmental Services Association. I don't know what that's, but perhaps we could ask the officers whether they are aware of any other kind of, you know, especially focusing around issues around climate change, carbon reduction, all that kind of stuff, which is really linked to this whole issue, isn't it? So that's basically, yeah, I just wondered if there's any scope for that.
Yeah, really interesting point, but just to give you a bit more background information, for the last probably 3 months or so, there has been work going on in the background with Environment Kirklees, who are another volunteer community sector group. It's similar really to the work that we've heard from Natural Kirklees, but it's the group that's looking to umbrella and work with different community environmental groups. And they are working on putting together quite a major conference at the Media Centre in the spring. And our officers, they're not leading that, but they are going to support that work. And the idea is to bring in organisations from outside Kirklees, from places like Manchester and Leeds, where interesting things are happening, groups from within Kirklees, to have a full session over a Saturday looking at the different, the big issues, things like climate change and so on, but the sort of smaller issues about recycling and reusing items. So that will happen. We can perhaps try and get some people to come to that second meeting, but just to make you aware, this wider event is going to take place in the spring, which should be really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Right, thanks very much for attending, and thanks very much again for the quality of your questions. I thought there was a really interesting discussion. Thank you.